My name is Jessica Ulrich, or Jessica LeBeau, depending on who you ask. It's kind of the same. I am from the Wonders of Thetis podcast, where we talk about the Dragon Age RPG. This is my first AetherCon, but more importantly, I am here to introduce Ed, Leo, Jonathan, and Keith from Shades of Vengeance.
Hello.
Hello.
So,
Hello.
But why don't you guys each of you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and like what you do for Shades of Vengeance in particular?
John
Ed,
is
you're
on
up.
the left of my screen, so he's going first. I knew that was going to happen. John's going first.
Why me?
Because
What
you're
did
on the
I
left
do?
of my screen, obviously.
Okay. Hi, I am Jonathan Lewis, head of SoV Comics, our comics division through Shades of Vengeance. And my black cat just came into the room.
Oh,
Green eyes and all.
oh, sweet baby.
Yep.
It
And
doesn't work for Shades of Vengeance comics, though.
no. Though she would be an amazing mascot for us. Anyway, so I write, edit, letter, find artists, run our campaigns, etc. when our different comics come out. I also help on the writing of some of our books. I've been on the team since the original era of the consortium that we released, and I think I was one of the first people to start going to the conventions with Ed, way back to the Canadian Anime North one that we went to.
Yep. Keith, do you want to go next?
Which has a whole set of adventures. Yes, Keith. I want to hear about Keith.
You want to hear about me? Can you even hear me?
Yep.
Right. My name
Don't
is
worry, you're
Keith
not
Dawes, which isn't really, but that's my pen name, and that's the only name that everybody knows me by. I'm responsible for graphic design. I've been working with Ed for quite a long time now, and these guys. I don't. What is it now? About 4 years?
About 5.
Can't remember.
About 5.
5 years. Long time. Yeah, all thanks to my wife, and I'll shoot her later. So we've been, and I also deal with a little bit of illustration, but mainly graphics. A lot to do with marketing as well. We have a lot of discussions about marketing, things like that, because I've got 30 years behind me working in advertising, doing advertising design stuff like that, which is probably why I do the graphics mainly. And that's basically it. That's my function.
All right, Leo?
Leo,
Oh, is it my
I
turn now?
nominate you.
All right, thank you, Keith. So I'm Leo Kosh. I'm probably the newest recruit to Shades of Vengeance. When I'm not doing bits and bobs of audio work, I'm a minion. I do lots of different things. I go to the conventions and help with sales. I'm an occasional panelist, and sometimes I bounce ideas off of Ed and stay optimistic.
And
But mostly I do
Irresilence
audio-
comes out of it, you know.
Yeah, there we go. And
Zombies.
that too. Yeah, so when I'm not doing Shades of Vengeance sales things, I'm doing the audio editing, or I'm coming up with soundscapes for based off our RPGs
And
audiobook things.
And just on that note, I actually mentioned you yesterday in our panel, Leo, where we were talking about ambience at the table, and I was talking about how I have a member of my team who does soundscapes. So if anyone is here who listened to that panel yesterday called Propping It Up, How to Create Ambience at Your Table, Leo is in fact the individual I was referring to who's on my team.
Woohoo!
There
Never
you
meet
go.
your heroes.
And that leaves me. I'm Ed Jowett. I am an insomniac. I'm the lead game creator. I am the managing director. I deal with the vast majority of the finances, the marketing, the game creation itself, the writing, art direction, working with each of these 3 wonderful people to make sure that all of that stuff happens. And I occasionally even run games. That happens.
Ooh.
That does happen.
So yeah, that's
Has there
that's
been
pretty
a
much me.
single convention where you weren't running nearly every game we had?
Yeah, actually, I have to be honest. October MCM this year, I only ran about 6 games.
I didn't get to go. Didn't happen if I didn't see it.
All right.
Pixar, it didn't happen.
Oh, we have picks.
We got plenty of picks. It's fine.
Oh, very good.
We're good. It definitely happened.
So
Well,
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming and listening to us ramble. and hopefully we don't bore you too much. We've got a lot of exciting things to say.
And if we do, you can put suggestions in the chat, and we'll see how that goes.
Oh, there we go. All right, well, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about how you guys got started. How did you get started creating games?
So this is kind of a John and me story. He's already mentioned once.
I love this story.
He's already mentioned once about Anime North in Canada, which we went out to in May 2012. Is that right?
Sounds right. About 5 years ago now, yeah.
About 5 years ago. We went out in May 2012. Now, this was before we even had our first full rulebook. We went out there with, what was it, John? It was 10 primers and 25 comics. We had our first comic.
Like, oh man, we're taking all these back.
We had our first comic, The Last Stand of Stiletto Unit. We had the rulebook primer for Era of the Consortium. And we sat down...
We had part 1 of Last Stand of Stiletto Unit.
That's true. That's true. We sat down, and I remember our first guy who came along. He came along and he sat down and he said, "You look so lonely and dejected. I thought I'd come and throw you a bone." Do you remember, John?
I remember that, and I was like, "Thank you, you jerk." Oh, and because that's when I started doing the table tricks to see if I could get people to sit by us just by having an open table near us.
Anyway,
that still works, you know.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
We started this convention, not really sure what was going to happen, and the reason that I'm saying this is how we got started creating games is until then we had sort of one half game, and at that convention we did a couple of panels. We were asked to go and do a panel on game creation, and we met someone who was sort of a successful game creator, didn't we, John?
Yeah, he was a board game creator of some sort of hex panel thing.
Yeah, I genuinely don't remember what the name was, but I mean, I'll be honest, the game looked good.
Yeah. I still want to find it someday and play it.
Yeah, I mean, and this guy, we were in this panel in Anime North. We had 50 people in front of us, all super enthusiastic about finding out how to make games and how to do things. And it was John and myself and this other guy, and we were sat there, and the reality was that he was telling the story. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Don't publish your game.
It's selling your children into slavery was the phrase he used.
And we listened to that. We exchanged one glance for 2 seconds, and John grabbed the microphone and said, "Or alternatively, if you want to publish your game and you want to keep your idea, then come and have a chat with us, because we'll help you do it." And
I think I rambled a little bit more than that, but yeah, it was something really short like that.
Just to jump in, that's like a recurring theme of Shades of Vengeance panels, as far as I know, out of what's been going on.
Yeah, I mean something that we like to do because it gives the opportunity for us to play more brilliant games that may or may not make it through the publishers weeding out process. Publishers take, what was it they said in that panel that we did together, Leo? Was it 97% were rejected or something?
Yeah, they said they were incredibly bleak, and they said 97 to 98% of games are rejected before we have a look at them. And out of those 2%, X amount are edited before we even consider them again. They kept building up a ladder that people had to go for.
So, I mean...
But yeah, 98%. That's just...
Excuse me. We'd already decided at that
Jessica,
stage...
you have your name on it again.
I did. I got it to work. Is it...
Well done.
Is it backwards for you guys, or is it just mirroring for me?
It shows backwards for you, but it's correct for us.
Okay, good. That's all I needed to know. Okay, carry on.
So I'd already decided at this stage that I was going to publish it myself, and what happened as a result of this panel was actually that we we made quite a lot of new friends, didn't we, John? We met the guys who are now Dyson Stuff. That was before they'd even started the podcast, wasn't it?
Yep.
And we met the creator of, in fact, these games that are right behind my head, Amazing Space Adventures. Not long afterwards, we met the creator of Order of the Link as well. We really got into creating games because we want to have games out there that people will enjoy playing. And for me, some of those are my games, that I'm creating. And I'm obviously putting a lot of time and effort into creating the games that I want to get out there. But I mean, we also like to help other people make their dreams become a reality.
Well, and not just gamers either. We like making sure that artists, writers, people that are just editors and letterers actually get their name on the page, actually get remembered for what they did and what they contributed.
I think that's huge. I think that that's a really important part of everything. The human element, I think, so often sort of gets neglected by people who think about joining sort of these sort of things. And I think the human element is such a crucial component to making everything work.
It goes down.
Cohesively.
It goes down to the
something that makes it
rulebooks
work-
as well.
Sorry.
No, go
You-
Keith, go.
I was just going to say, I think that something that makes it work really well is that we all really love what we're doing. That is the core of it. Everybody that's involved, even all the illustrators and everybody that's involved on every level, really enjoys doing this. It's not only a job; it's fun. And
Yeah.
I don't think we'd be doing it if it wasn't, because it's hard work.
Yep.
A lot of hard work.
Oh, I bet.
Definitely.
Well, speaking of your hard work, let's talk a little bit about some of the games you've created already.
Right.
Come on, Ed.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay,
They're actually good.
so fair warning, guys. I'm about to go into a detailed description of 8 games, so go to sleep and wake up in about 10 minutes and you'll be good, okay?
I'll have my cat meow into the microphone.
That works.
I really need to keep procedures there. Telling the audience to go to sleep is not going to work.
Okay, fine. Think about pink elephants instead.
The game, they're great.
Halfway there.
So the first game that we created was Era the Consortium, which is a sci-fi epic RPG.
Fantastic epic.
It gives over 500 years of playable history, and the
And
idea
the way
behind
the
that.
history is written is amazing.
The way the history is written is amazing, and I'll get to that in 1 minute because, John, that is a perfectly valid thing to say. So the idea is that you can leap into any point in that 500-year history in order to play any subgenre of sci-fi that you can imagine, really. So if you like cyberpunk, you can leap in at one point. If you like exploration and exploring new worlds, sort of a Star Trek style, you can leap in at an earlier point in the chain. If you want to do something that's a bit more kind of Star Wars-esque, fighting against an evil government that's become corrupt, that's towards the end of the timeline. If you want to do something a bit like Starship Troopers and the aliens are invading and they're going to kill us all, that's kind of somewhere in the middle where the Consortium comes under attack. So this entire 500 years of history is not for you to sit down and read like a history textbook. It is...
That's boring.
Yeah, it really is. It is a sort of a framework that you can leap into and actually create the stories that you want to within this overall framework. Now, when we first created it, and this is what John was referring to, when I first wrote this book and wrote the history, this was effectively a history book. And John basically turned to me and said, well, I'm cleaning up the language a bit, but he said, Ed, no one wants to read 500 years of real history. Why do you think they want to read 500 years of fictional history? And he came up with an alternative idea, an alternative structure idea for how we could structure this rulebook to make it a bit more appealing. And I'll let him explain what he came up with.
If anybody has ever read the original Bram Stoker's Dracula, where it's a collection of diary entries, newspaper clippings, excerpts from biographies that are completely fictional and don't exist, that's kind of what we went for. It's how we actually consume reality today, based on you might read a news article, you might hear your friend talk about it, you might watch a YouTube video, and that's how you learn what's going on in the world. With the history, is we made it as real as that.
And as a result, we have a written timeline that explains the overall sort of chunks of history and explains the actual events like you might find them in a historical book. But then under many of those timeline entries, not quite all of them, but the vast majority, we then have a short story that lasts sort of between 1 and 2 pages for the most part. That gives you a little bit of the emotional content of what's going on during that time. What that gives you is it gives you a little bit of emotional grounding within these events and an ability to feel what it's like to have experienced them. And that's pretty much the way that we handled this great challenge of trying to put an entire 500 years of history in a single rulebook. So that was just our first book. That was the first thing we worked on. We took a preliminary version of it to Canada. About a year later, wasn't it, John, when we first did MCM Comic Con in London, and we had our first copies of the rulebook. That's now 4 years ago. So after we'd completed that book, we moved on to Era Liars. And that was actually when I kind of, around the end of the time when I finished Era the Consortium, and when we were starting Era Liars, is actually when I met Keith, because Keith did the front cover artwork for Era Liars.
That was you?
That
Yeah,
was
that
me.
Yeah. And he did his very first image for me, which was a rendering of a tavern, which where a story was being told, because the game is about telling stories. The idea of Era Liars is that adventuring is just plain dangerous, not to mention unsanitary. No one wants to go out there. No one really wants to be an adventurer. The only reason they do it is for the gold and the glory. Well, in this game, you play as people who are willing to tell the stories and gain all of that gold and glory without putting in any of the effort and facing none of the danger. These are the liars.
I absolutely love this concept.
These are the
All
liars.
the glory, no risk.
Indeed.
Oh, the actual playing is my favorite part. So, like in most tabletop role-playing games, the GM tells the story, and the players have to act like puppets within that narrative. Whereas,
Puppets.
hey, I've watched Leo play. Era Liars is the reverse. The GM is the bartender, or the people in the town square, or the children you're telling the story to. Sits back and listens to the players tell him a story, or her, and then they decide whether they buy it, whether they believe it or not. And I just love that concept of flipping an RPG that way.
Yeah, so
other
flips
really
the normal thing on its head, meaning that as the GM, because I'm a perpetual GM, the reason I came up with this is because I'm sick and tired of having to think of everything all the time, every time. So, hand it over to the players, make them tell a story, and then when they disagree with each other and the story sort of gets conflicted, then they're punished. So they have to think about everything that's been said, remember everything that's been said, and keep it consistent, because I'm just sat there listening to the story, and if it doesn't flow, I'm someone who has a lot of experience making stories because I'm a GM, right?
I'm one of the only role players in my friendship group, so I use this game to introduce them, because they don't know, because most people don't know how to role play. They kind of go, "Oh, can I do this?" So I get them to improv the con and the story. And the other great thing about GMing that is you get to jump on people if they hesitate or they slip up, because you can just push them into different directions.
And the thing that's interesting about this game is it gives you a massive sort of scope. You can literally tell any story. There is no limit that the GM places on you. Obviously, there's a setting. It's a low fantasy setting, and we say there's no actual magic because magic is a bit too easy to disprove. If you claim to be a mage and you can't throw fireballs, you're instantly obvious. You're not.
Can I jump in
with Verity Toolman?
No, the Aquaman story.
Oh, the Aquaman story.
So one of the GMs that ran a game for us at our con, one of the players decided that They were Dennis Lakeman or whatever his name was, and he was master of all fish. And he said, "I'll prove it to you." And he walked out to the town square and waved his hand over the pool, and he rolled double luck. He did so well that the fish swam to the same side. So he basically went like that, and they were all convinced, and they kind of go, "Oh wow!" So he basically just
I was the GM
brought
for
in
that
the
game.
glory there.
I was running that game.
Oh right.
It was hilarious.
That's amazing. No, this game sounds like something that I really, really need in my life. I did some research on it before we had this, before we started, and it was immediately the thing where I was just, oh, it's ahead of time. This is amazing.
It's one of my favorites to watch get played, especially watching kids play it. I can remember at one of the conventions we were at, there was a dad that was looking at our stuff and saying, I'm not sure if this is right for me. My kid has attention deficit disorder still for more than 5-10 minutes. I said, okay, I got a game I want you to try. 2 hours later, the dad was like, okay, I'm buying everything you have because I've never had my kid sit still for this.
That's amazing. I actually, I work in a school, and I could see this being a really useful tool for helping kids sort of learn to express themselves.
Yep, my mom's a kindergarten teacher and help with parts of it, and watching kids, teaching them how to structure a story so you can tell it is just amazing as a teacher.
Some kids from a middle school in London that were coming to MCM bought a copy of Liars for their D&D club. They were like, "Oh, we have to show this to Sir."
Yes.
Loved it.
Perfect.
So that worked.
So that was Era Liars. It was a very different sort of scope of game to Era of the Consortium. Era of the Consortium is, I wouldn't exactly call it serious, especially not after the session I finished 2 hours ago. But probably a bit of a stretch to claim it's serious. But it's kind of more a traditional RPG, whereas Era Liars was something where we tried to push the boundaries a little bit. We tried to think about what it might look like if you're not doing a traditional RPG, and we decided to sort of do a little experiment. The next game that we created was Era the Empowered, which John gave me a hand with the timeline. So again, I grew up on the 90s animated cartoons, as did John. We both absolutely love those cartoons, and we wanted to bring that element into, one of the Era role-playing games, on our rule set. So, we created situations within the timeline that we made for that offered sort of all of the things that you encounter in the sort of the cliched superhero stories. So, first discovering your powers, or Atlantis coming to the surface of Earth and attacking, or the gods coming back, because they're in fact superheroes who were just asleep and not gone. Or, the giant alien threat from outer space that's trying to consume the Earth. All of these things are in there. And
Tune in next week.
Indeed. And all of those things are in there, and and again, with the timeline, same kind of timeline setup that we use so successfully in Era of the Consortium, we're actually providing the opportunity to choose the kind of events you want to play. You can skip forward some events and play the same characters within that different event that you want to try out. Keith is actually doing all of the illustrations for this book. He's got started. Sorry?
I'm 15.
Oh, it looks good.
15 again. I'm drawing all the things that that got me into drawing in the first place. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
So, we're actually working on... we originally produced just a rulebook primer, a small volume, about 40 pages, that let you play the game, but didn't include character creation. Now, anyone who knows a little about the mechanical side of character creation for role-playing games, particularly superhero role-playing games, will know that there's a lot of complexity in there to get it balanced, and it's taken me a little while to perfect it. I'm more than happy that I've got it right now. I've done a lot of playtests, and we've had some fairly crazy ideas, such as resurrection, removing the weak nuclear force from whatever they touch, and various other bits and pieces like that. So,
Blood Mage on steroids.
Blood Mage on steroids. So we're satisfied that we finally managed to balance everything out to make it fair for everyone, and we're now therefore looking to finish that core rulebook off, which will be a larger volume before too much longer. In fact, we'll talk about that in a little bit. The next game that we created, this was actually because John asked me to. John asked me to build a game.
Way too many of our stories either start or end with, and then John said.
I know. That's because I can't say.
It's true.
That's because I can't say. And then Ed decided. John asked me to create a game that had a more tactile element, specifically something more than dice, cards, or similar, was what he said. And what I decided to do, because at the time, this was about 2 years ago now, at the time Walking Dead was very popular. And I decided to, it still is, but it was particularly a spike at the point when I...
was about to say.
It still is, but it was particularly a spike when I decided to make the book. And, so I created Era Survival, which is my version of a survival horror universe where zombies are taking over, which really focuses not just on the zombies themselves, but on the way in which humanity responds to this. What happens is they splinter into 14 factions, each of whom have a very different idea of how humanity should be surviving the post-apocalypse. So, there's loads and loads of scope for all different kinds of adventures in there. From the runners, who actually are the only method of communication between the few human settlements that actually remain intact, to the swarm, who thinks that the answer to everything is kill it with fire.
Mad Max meets Genghis Khan.
So, that gives, a nice wide world, and the cards were also involved. We added a karma system that allows people to be good,
I love
be evil.
This system.
And the thing is that good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people, but usually if the bad people, or the party in general, overcomes the bad stuff, then you get something good as a result, right? So it's balanced enough that it doesn't feel like, oh, well, the good people have all kinds of good things and the bad people are always having a bad time. And then as you do actions within the world, it's nothing to do with what you intend to do. It's to do with the consequences of your actions, which only the GM can really know. So if you do something good, you can in a moment. If you do something good, and as a result something good happens, then yes, you gain good karma. If you do something evil, and something evil happens, then you gain bad karma. And then if you do what John did...
Paved. Oh, no.
What I did, I built a character, and it was somebody that it was a throwaway character that I could play at conventions and stuff, so I wasn't too worried about this guy. I sat down and played a game with a couple guys, and this guy, I wrote him to be the evilest, most badass guy that you'd ever met, This is a guy that Lobo would be high-fiving on the way by. So in his opening salvo of what he was going to do, he's like, okay, I know there are some survivors on the other side of this wall in this room, and I know they have supplies, so I'm going to break through the wall like Kool-Aid Man style with gun in hand and say, okay, give me all your supplies. So I broke through the wall, and the wall collapsed in. It killed the 15 zombies that were attacking the survivors in the room. And so the survivors were like, oh my God, our hero, oh, you saved us. And the story just kind of spiraled away from there, that everything I did to try and convince these people that I was evil, and the band of people that was following me just got larger and larger and larger until I had like 30, 40 people that were, our savior, we must follow him. And finally, I reached a point where I was like, okay, I will prove to these guys that I'm evil. Pulled out a gun, turned to a guy, and blew his head off. And there was silence. The dice rolled, and it was... The people are like, oh gosh, he has developed psychic abilities and can tell who the traitors are without having to ask. he knew that this guy was a traitor and was going to turn against us, and I gave up.
Brilliant
That's
opportunities for a GM
fantastic.
to really screw with characters.
I like, speaking of a good example of the karma system, I like Ed's character, Freddie Payne, who was he was like an apprentice medic. And he tried to
Apprentice
fix
Wise
a
ones.
helicopter.
So yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So Wise ones in Era Survival are sort of engineers who remember how to use some of the older technology that isn't being made anymore. Sorry, Leo, please continue.
Like helicopters.
Yeah. So, like helicopters, for example, like one of the last existing helicopters that still works. Freddie Payne, despite having like the best morality, lawful good, everything, he blows up one of these helicopters. So
My
he is
mistake.
ousted.
It was an accident.
He's ousted from society and chased away. So he steals the last gun he can get his hands on and just tries to decide to make his way as a bandit.
But you see,
But
as
yeah,
a result of
karma.
As a result of accidentally blowing up that helicopter, he has doomed thousands of people to death because medical supplies won't get to them, which they would have been if it had been repaired. So he suddenly goes from being really good karma to being really evil karma because he's actually ended the lives, effectively, of thousands of people. So karma is not always what you think it's going to be, and just having good intentions or bad intentions does not mean that you end up with good or bad karma.
That is a really, really interesting system to have for sort of a behavioral alignment thing. I love it.
Yeah, I have a problem with alignment in D&D because I play with the kind of people who go, right, I'm chaotic evil, I'm going to screw everything up because I can. And
He played one too many. He played one too many sets of paranoia and got addicted to that character type.
And I decided to, do this because that would then mean that, you can go in intending to be evil all you like, but you can very easily end up with John if the GM's reasonably creative.
I will never forget that adventure. Thanks.
You're very welcome. So next, we actually went to a convention, didn't we, Leo? We went to Dragon Meet.
Oh yeah, we did. This was fun.
And at the end of Dragon Meet, we were all going, why are we so tired? This is a one-day convention. In October, we did a 3-day convention, and we did not feel this tired. My voice is going. So, someone from a booth next to us actually sat down and we were chatting towards the end of the convention when it was quite quiet. And he said, well, why don't you make a game where you don't have to speak?
Why don't you have a game where the players have to shut up? Was something closer to his
no,
his
it was
at that point,
the idea was that the GM would not speak. And we actually then took that, Leo, on the train home, and we made that into Era Silence. So Era Silence is a high fantasy game where you have magic, you have all kinds of sort of fantasy type stuff, but you are stuck on the Isle of Silence, the mythical Eye of Silence, where you are not able to speak. So you're sort of sat there going, and obviously you can't yell to go, oh God, look behind you, look behind you. You're just like, or sort of tapping someone on the shoulder or pointing at someone. Yeah, sorry about that.
This is very fun.
So Era Silence offers you this opportunity to play as characters trying to earn your name as warriors. So you're brand new kind of clansman coming of age, and you're trying to earn your name by completing various challenges. And these challenges, some of them are puzzles, some of them are combat-based, some of them are riddles, and you've sort of got a variety of things that you have to work together as a team to overcome, but you equally can't speak in order to do that. Which is
speaking out of character, kind of going, "Oh, can I do this?" Like you've got to sort of.
Well, you can speak out of character in certain ways. You can say, "Oh, my character runs from here to here." You can do that. But any kind of, "Oh, I know the answer to this. It's X." Totally not allowed. Which actually, again, creates a very interesting dynamic at the table. We had a lot of fun when we played that, didn't we, Leo?
It was great fun, yeah. And also, it proves there are two types of people at conventions. because when I pitched that game to people, people either went because they were a GM and they couldn't wait to torture people, or they were players and they just sort of laughed. But it wasn't a like, haha, this is hilarious laugh. It was a
I'm terrified that my GM will learn about this game and actually make me play it.
Exactly. That was the feeling. But yeah, the great thing about Era Silence, at least for me, because I got to throw ideas at Ed and some of them stuck. We talked about what games we liked, like Legend of Zelda or Shadow of the Colossus, and then we mashed that up with bits of mythology that we liked from different parts of Greek mythology or Norse mythology, or I can't think of any of the other examples off the top of my head.
Greek and Norse, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and we sort of just first off we started by writing down the alphabet and coming up with what would stick, what would sound good.
And then I went away and spent about 24 working hours trying to figure out how to make all of the names line up with the various skills so that you had an equal chance, roughly, of having the right name and the right skill. And, you know, then have 10 which were strong characters because they get sort of melee and blacksmithing and that kind of thing. And then 10 which were swift characters because they get stealth and dodge and that stuff. And then 10 who were magic characters. Oh.
Oh, we came up with a bunch of different names. So, you know, we've got Zavi, we've got I think we had Mercy at one point, I'm not sure, and then we've got Fred.
I think Mercy made it. We have Fred. We do have Fred.
Good old Fred.
Yep, good old Fred. That saved me a couple of times. And then on top of that, because I said to Ed, no, it's Silence, so you know how I can't help but make puns. Let me make some soundscapes to fill in the ambience.
So soundscapes for a game called Silence.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, if the players aren't speaking, then what are they listening to? The GM? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, you enter this area. And what we did is when we made these soundscapes, we actually made them while timing how long it would take to explain something. And then sort of filling the soundscape around that so that it would, you know, if you talk at a roughly average pace, and I know I talk a bit faster than most people, but if you talk at a roughly average pace, then it'll actually fit very nicely into the soundscape while you're doing the description. So, you know, maybe you enter the burning village, and the GM has a little piece to read. The
yes,
GM
but
has
without the soundtrack.
And you know, you're listening to the flames burn as the various houses burn and collapse a bit, and so on. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Oh. But better than that.
Much better than that.
You can't do my job. It's my unique selling point.
And that game actually, those soundscapes actually ended up going out with the game as stretch goals, which I think is something that I'm still really proud of about Era Silence to this day. You know, that we're working to create that ambiance. We're working to help build that image of what it's like within these challenges.
It sounds amazing.
Hey!
You made Leo dance. He's happy now.
Oh.
So then we moved on to Era Hitman, which is a modern setting. It was actually inspired by a peer of mine who wanted to put modern setting assassins with superpowers in, you know, as a possible setting. And what I did is he published his game and I let him have his time, and then about a year and a half later I published Era Hitman, which was sort of my version of the same idea that we come up with around a similar time. And what I did is I used a very different way of describing superpowers to the way I'd done it in Era the Empowered. So your uses for superpowers are very, very limited. You aren't allowed to use them too much, but they're extremely powerful. You know, you get to remove the strong nuclear force from someone and they just atomize. You know, you get to reverse gravity, or, you know, you get to make a force field in front of yourself that bullets can't penetrate, and so on. But that sounds all brilliant and like it would be way too easy. It's also inspired by sort of Hitman, the computer game. That all sounds like it would be way, way too easy. You'd obviously win. Well, now bear in mind that your targets also have powers. So it makes a very interesting balance. You're having to run around and be super careful because someone might just zap you and you're dead. So that was
that's Era Hitman.
Yeah, that was Era Hitman in a nutshell. That was fun. I basically made that game because it was a bit of fun to do. Pretty much.
It sounds fun.
Fun to play.
It's fun to play, definitely. Yeah.
It is fun to play.
The being on a boat on the top deck and reversing the gravity so that the two people go woof.
Thump.
Whoa.
Or set with a force field.
Indeed. Someone at the at MCM, the most recent convention, encased themselves in a spherical force field and used it as a hamster ball to crush people. That was his solution to the force field.
I mean, wow.
Oh, this is one of the reasons I love role playing as well, just because it's the best ideas out of the
Insanity.
worst
How creative a
situations.
solution can you come up with the most limitations?
Hamster Ball of Death is a pretty good one. Ooh, you can talk about your newest pocket game now.
Irabalam, yes.
I think-
So after that, we moved on to Irabalam, which just finished on Kickstarter quite recently. This one was a new kind of experiment for us. It was, well, for me anyway. I went back to sci-fi. Sci-fi is I'm a sci-fi guy, okay, I'll be honest. Pretty much everything that I write feels a little bit like sci-fi.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah, but not everyone else does.
Proofread.
I'm on the side. I like sci-fi best too.
What I wanted to do was actually bring something new to sci-fi role-playing games in the Era universe that I hadn't done already with Era the Consortium, which was really quite a challenge because, I kind of deliberately designed it to cover everything. So what I did is I looked at Star Wars, Luke and his X-Wing, and I looked at Firefly with Wash and Serenity, and I looked at various other similar things. Actually, the Flight of the Navigator, classic, and I thought about how each of these pilots and each of these ships, no matter how intelligent they are in the case of the Flight of the Navigator, they aren't complete without their pilot. Only together are those two things an actual complete character. So I made a game sort of based around that as an idea, that, the pilot is half of the picture and the ship that they fly is the other half, and one without the other is not a complete character. Alone they can't do anything. So that was really the idea behind the Irabalam. And I was actually also inspired by the Kickstarter Projects of Earth initiative. They wanted people to do all these inspiring things about Voyager 40-year anniversary just passed, and it was in celebration of that. The project had to launch between the launch of Voyager 2 and the launch of Voyager 1, which were in the opposite order, if no one actually knew that. 2 was launched and then 1. In September, and they were.
Which one was feature?
Voyager 6 actually was Vija, which hasn't yet been launched, as far as I know. I have my credentials. I know Star Trek, although I still get SETI Alpha 5 and SETI Alpha 6 mixed up.
It's okay. So did Kirk.
Chekhov, yeah. Anyway, so the idea.
Moving back on topic.
The idea was that you would come up with all of these interesting and inspiring ideas about how Earth has progressed and so on. And I looked at that brief, which was, it has to be inspired by Voyager, and thought, nah. You know what? I'm going to think about what happens if a probe was to crash land on top of an alien power plant and the entire world was to blow up. And I'll think about that, because that's what I find inspiring. So from there...
Pessimist. Optimist.
Yeah, optimism.
How very
right?
British of you.
So from there, I developed this storyline about aliens who were sort of doing an evil Battlestar Galactica looking for revenge on humanity, who had sent this probe, never intended it to crash on their planet or anything, but boom, it blew up. And they're now sort of trekking across space looking for Earth to pay them back for all the damage they've done. And, they run into humanity in this system called HX7371. An inspiring name, I'm sure you'll agree. They run into humans here when they've only just colonized the region, and they're looking for Earth, so they're looking to eliminate humanity. And what happens as a result is humanity build a lot of small one-man ships, because that's all they can really get the resources for, and they launch them with the pilots to go off and harry and interfere with the aliens' plans to destroy humanity. So, that really fits in very nicely to the theme of, only the ship and the pilot together actually make an entire character. So that was where I went with that. We're also actually offering that game both in Fate rules and also in Savage Worlds. Neither of those are quite finished yet. The Era D10 version is finished and has gone out to all the backers. And I'm working with some brilliant people. I'm working with James Gantry, who I think was in here a little earlier, on the Savage Worlds bit, and I'm working with Nick Bate on the Fate version of Era Balam. So I'm looking forward to those being finished off.
Champions of Earth.
It's called Champion of Earth. There can only be one. I am now done talking about Era Balam, and he wants me to move on to the next game, which is our first card game, which is called Champion of Earth. Now, the idea of this game is that you are going to defend Earth from an alien invasion. However, the aliens have figured out they always lose. They've seen all the movies. They know they always lose. They're not going to take that risk. So what they've done is they've raised the undead, and they brought forth creatures from the shadows, and they forged an alliance with the robots and cyborgs of Earth in order to boost their army. So you play as one of the last champions of Earth, trying to defend it against this massive alien invasion. And you get equipment that's, strewn around. Assault rifles, nukes, whatever you need. Although the nukes are fairly limited in number, I should say.
And there's this race who belongs to this guy named Occam.
Yeah.
Oh.
Don't forget the cold.
Not to mention the pen and the sword, both of which are in it. The pen being a 3 value item and the sword being a 2 value item.
Because the pen is mightier than the sword.
So yes, there are lots of very bad jokes in it. And it is absolutely glorious. So that was actually released in May, wasn't it? May, June. We released that for the first time. And
yeah, because we released it at UKGE.
This year?
This year?
Yeah, this year.
Yeah,
Oh,
UKGE.
My release time, I'm going to get every release date wrong. I'm just saying that now, because my sense of time is awful. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, we released it at UK Games Expo, and we're basically sold out by the end of UK Games Expo. I had to get another print run done. It's a quick play card game that really takes 20 to 30 minutes. And yeah, enormous fun. And
if it's full of bad jokes, it's definitely my kind of game.
Exactly, right. That's why I made it full of bad jokes, because yeah, who wouldn't want to play a light-hearted card game with bad jokes?
No one on this podcast. It's not a podcast, it's a stream, but no one on this stream.
Definitely not.
So, yeah.
I also your games are absolutely amazing. I am going to I don't have a whole lot of money right now, but I'm going to lose more because I have to go out and buy a whole bunch of these things as soon as I get the chance. But I hear that you guys are also making comics. Is that correct?
Yes. You said John's favorite word.
It's John's turn now. We'll sit back and let him talk.
Do tell about these comics.
So, in listing off all the different things, going back to our story of Era of the Consortium, and Ed handed me this tome, thump, and said, "Oh, John, this is our history. I need you to edit it for me." And me going, "No, I do this for a living," and I fell asleep. One of the other ideas I pitched to him was we should do like a comic book set in this universe and have it like inserted in the pages. And then Ed was like, "Yeah, no, that costs way too much to do." I said, "Well, how about we just do a comic then and just sell it on the side?" And we came up with a comic called The Last Stand of Stiletto Unit. It's the story of this group of people that are doing a suicide mission in order to save the solar system. How many billion lives, Ed?
14.
14 billion sentient lives and a whole lot of cats. From this doomsday of a weapon that can wipe out all life in a solar system, but leave stuff. So all the buildings, all the factories, all of that stuff would still be there. And you could just walk in and colonize it. As last chance, last stand to see if they can defeat. And yeah, I love the second part of it because it goes into what everybody was doing in the last day or two before they went on the mission, and why they're reacting the way they are as things happen. That comic. Anything you want to add to that one, Ed?
No, that pretty much covers it. We we already knew that this was the climax of the game, but
I want to say Heath was the artist on that one.
Yeah, Heath.
Not to be confused with Keith that's on this stream with us. Hi, Keith.
Yeah, no, we created this story that we knew was going to be the climax of the story, where these 8 people go in to try to stop this atrocity. And yeah, we talked about it a lot, and we decided that it was by far the best possibility for sort of our first comic. And I think even at the time, John, we talked about it as our first comic. We never talked about it as the only one we'll ever do, did we?
Yeah, it was always, and here we begin. Which actually brought me to the one, having listened to like the podcast that Jessica's on, a comic that we make that I know she would love is called Counting Down from 1, which is actually a joke that my daughter told me. I have a little she just turned 6, a 6-year-old daughter, and she loves telling me terrible jokes. I have no idea where she would have gotten that from.
Who can say, really?
Yeah. But one of her favorite ones was there's 2 jokes she really liked. She goes, like I'll just say, "Dad, that joke was made of paper." I go, "What do you mean paper?" "Yeah, it's terrible."
Hey.
You know. And her other one was, I'll give her something really difficult to do, and to show off how good she was at it, she goes, "Dad, that was easy. That was so easy." And I go, "Okay, how easy was it?" "It was so easy. It was easier than counting down from 1." And so that spawned an idea in my head for a comic about a group of people from the end of that 500 years of history going back in time to the beginning and trying to change it. And you'd think it would be the easiest thing ever, like counting down from 1. And it's everything that happens as fate and time and everything fights against them to make history not change. You know, if you weren't supposed to be in a certain place at a certain time because you didn't exist in that timeline, what would time throw in your way to stop you?
That is a fascinating concept. I've always been a sucker for time travel stuff, so I think that is a really cool idea. And the fact that it comes from a bad joke is just great.
Yeah, we actually built an entire campaign around the concept, and this is like an alternate universe direction that the campaign might have taken. Where but I think of all our comics, that's one of my favorites.
Seconded.
If only for that amazing scene where they're sitting there planning a murder, and one of the characters points out to the other one, "Hey, we're in a lunchroom. People, you can't be talking this loud. And so the
Hey everyone,
main
we're
character
planning a
stands up,
murder!
and
There you
there's
go.
dead silence for like 3 panels, and he slams his hand down on the table. Nobody cares.
It's pretty good. Let's see.
Oh, I love that one.
And I know you guys have at least a couple other comics. We're gonna have this panel does get to go a little bit longer than most of the others. We have a little bit of extra time, but we do definitely want to. Let's see. I think we've got a couple more comics. Something Bug War #1, right?
Yep.
Ed, that's
Isn't that
your-
one of yours?
Yep.
Yeah, no,
Go.
that's us. Bug War number
We'll
one
just have to.
leaps into the Bug War time. And yeah, you're right. We are running low on time, so I think we should skip past that. It's a great comic. You should read it. It's great. I could tell you loads about it, but we don't have that much time.
Oh, let me do the Empower comics real quick, because I either wrote or edited all 3 of those. I can run through them real fast.
Oh, please
Sure.
do. I want to hear about them.
Superhero comics. Woo!
Woo! So, imagine, if you will, a young man. He is sure that he can change the world. In fact, a beautiful young Filipino woman even shows up and tells him he can change the world. It was all a con. And it's a real neat story. If you get to see a guy try and untangle his own life, a teenager really, try and figure out what's gone wrong in his life, who's really to blame, and like most teenagers, realizing that it's you. That you can blame the people that lied to you, you can blame the people that told you the truth, but not loudly enough. But really, the choice is always yours. That's Lacuna's story. Now, the young Filipino lady that was helping him, her name is Penumbra in the comics. And she was by far everybody's favorite character. Always cracking jokes. She has the ability to manipulate the shadows around her, where she can focus them into physical matter. So occasionally she'll just randomly change her costume for no apparent reason other than she thinks it's funny. But like I think in that first Lacuna, she gets away from of hopping off the side of a building, and the main character leans over and looks down the building. She's made one of those spiral slides out of the shadows, and she's sliding down it like a kid.
Awesome.
Since she was everybody's favorite character from that comic, we went through and made 2 other comics. One is a straight up heist to a club in Hong Kong that she knows that the club owner has this ancient roll of film that she doesn't know what it has on it. Could be anything from like a assassination from another angle to the first silent film to something to prove that Disney wasn't the first guy to put animation and sound together at the same time. And he wasn't. And it's all about her trying to get this film and running into somebody that can manipulate light the same way she can manipulate shadows.
Ooh.
Second one has actually only been released today. Kickstarter, and it's the story of her fighting against a foe that can rival anything she can. She can't disappear into shadows like she's used to around this guy because he is a rabbit with great night vision.
That's a great reason.
Oh yeah. Anytime I try, like, it's a long story because we're low on time, but anytime I explain the whole concept to anybody, and you can go to the Kickstarter and read my whole speech about him, I've gotten so much fan art just based on the little blurb from the Kickstarter. I'm actually going to be posting some of it to the Kickstarter later today, but it I think might be one of my favorite comics I've ever written, just for the never-ending jokes on almost every panel, which Ed got most of. I'm so impressed with him.
I work hard.
I love that. But that's our 6 main comics that are out right now.
So man, those all sound like things I have to pick up out of our local comic store pretty much immediately. So,
woo. So yesterday on the panel about ambiance, I was asked how many. I was asked about projects I'm working on now, and I gave a fairly cryptic answer, which was I'm working on 9. I was immediately asked, when do you sleep? But what I thought I'd do is...
Who sleeps anymore?
I know. What I thought I'd do is run through very quickly what these 9 are. and I thought maybe these guys might have some input on a couple of them. So first of all, we've got Era the Consortium expansions, which are up on Kickstarter right now. A year ago, we actually made a Kickstarter for Era the Consortium expansions, and we unlocked 8. So we unlocked 3 to start with, and then 1 additional one with each stretch goal. So we unlocked 8 expansions, which was fantastic.
Wow.
We've
super successful.
We've got another one up on Kickstarter right now, which has already unlocked 3, and probably while we've been on this is on its way to its 4th. So we're actually doing sort of more expansions to try and increase the things that you can do within the Consortium universe that are catered for directly by rules. For example, Free Trader, one of the expansions, allows you to have various types of cargo. It gives you lists of prices at 30 locations for 40 kinds of cargo. So if you want to go around the Consortium trading, you can absolutely do that. It's totally possible. There are many others, and I'd strongly recommend that anyone who is interested goes out and has a look at the Era of the Consortium, A Universe of Expansions 2 Kickstarter. Beyond that, we've already talked briefly about the Era the Empowered core rulebook, which John, Keith, and I are working on. We're hoping to get that out early next year. Thank you for the link to the Consortium.
Adventure.
Yeah, this one's been a little bit the one that got away, but I think that we're going to manage it this time. We've then got Era the Chosen, which is a horror game. It's based around the idea that our universe is colliding with another, and both of them are kind of breaking down at the join. And as a result, creatures from this other universe, which is dying, all the stars are going out and all the planets are dying, are trying to escape into our universe where, it's vibrant and full of life. And as a result, you get a lot of sort of mysterious happenings. It's a little bit inspired by Doctor Who's sort of brand of horror, and also it's got a little bit of the sort of Turok feel, which is a game on the N64 for anyone who doesn't know. It gives you that little bit of...
Dinosaur Hunter.
Dinosaur Hunter,
that
Turok
one, yeah.
2, and Turok 3. Because Dinosaur Hunter didn't have the Mag 60.
That's true.
We've then got one of the biggest games that I think we'll be producing next year is called Battlecruiser Alamo.
Keith, you're in Mexico, right?
I am.
Remember the Alamo.
Well,
Oh god.
Indeed.
That's really funny. I can't help but remember it because I do all the artwork for the guy who wrote the original book. So
This is actually our very first license as a company. The author, Richard Tung, has actually been working with Keith for very many years, if I understand right.
Yeah, a long time, yeah.
And Keith has done all of the artwork during that time. Now, when I sat down with Richard and we talked about role-playing games, he was really interested in the possibility. And this is the first time that I've actually been able to speak about the Battlecruiser Alamo. So I've alluded to a game that I can't talk about. This is what it is. Go out, have a look at Richard's books. They're fantastic. I've had the opportunity to read through several while doing research to help write this game. Keith's obviously read the vast majority of them to do the covers. Keith's cover artwork is going to feature in the book. He's going to do new artwork for this book. We're really excited. It's a brilliant military sci-fi universe. Loads of stuff going on, loads of things to offer a role player to explore, space combat, ground combat, interesting political situations, betrayal at every turn, frankly. And we're starting with the core rulebook, which is going to be based on Richard's first 3 books. That is something that I'm super excited about. We're aiming for a launch date of UK Games Expo next year for the Battlecruiser Alamo game.
Yeah, I think the Expanse were even better. Just that kind of a world.
Yeah,
it's just awesome. It's great.
Fair
They're
comment.
great books. They really are. So inspiring.
Yeah. Strongly recommend you go check that out, especially if any of this sounds exciting to you, because those are good books, and the role-playing game is coming before long. So make sure you know enough before you end up in the in the need to read up on it at the last minute. Next, we've got Era Atlantis, which is a high fantasy game which will feature underwater and magic and fish people and shellfish people and Naga and all manners of sort of creatures. It's going to be interesting because it will have a magic system based on divine favor. So you will gain favor with the gods by doing certain actions, and as a result, you will gain abilities that then are consumed as you call in the favor from the divine being. Which should be a really interesting mechanic. It's gone really well in playtests, and I'm looking forward to getting that one out there before too much longer.
Have we got a mechanic for
play it?
Sorry, I missed both of those because you both spoke at the same time.
Leo, you know
Have we
I go
got-
first.
Yes, go first.
He bought it. I can't believe he bought it.
Yes, John?
I can't wait to get to actually play this one. It has everything in it that I can use to irritate Ed with.
Yes, that sounds like a wise thing to do to, your deity.
Oh, we have a question in the chat asking about what would be the time setting for Atlantis
Atlantis
from
is...
Phyllis Berto.
Good question. Atlantis is set in a sort of somewhere between relatively primitive and steampunk, depending on which kind of species you are. So some of them are able to forge metal and weapons, and that's about the limit of what they can do. Whereas others kind of have more technology and are more able to do sort of limited things, limited mechanical stuff.
Do the crabs keep all the technology to themselves, so they're selfish shellfish?
No.
Well, I
No.
think we're just about out of... No, I'm kidding.
I've then got another game, which we're currently calling Era Supernatural, which is a game about the reality that humans in this world have been ruled over by vampires, by werewolves, and by mages for generations, and humanity is just starting to notice. So as a result, they are rising up. Vampire hunters are appearing. There's a religion which specifically tries to eliminate the mages, and all these various things are going on at the same time. And in that, you enter this world as either one of the supernatural beings or as one of the humans. And yet, you may end up in a party with others because while some humans hate vampires, they don't hate mages, for example. So there's an interesting sort of multi-layered conflict going on there, which renders the setting quite fascinating. Next, we've got Era Cyberpunk, which is, I promise that's just a placeholder name. We haven't named it yet. I'm working on that with Lucas, who was running the Era the Empowered game this weekend. And it's inspired by The Matrix. The idea is that we are trying to sort of give you the ability to modify reality to a small degree. But if you go too far out of line, things are going to stop you. That's pretty much all I can say for now. We've got some very good ideas, and we're trying to figure out what we can explain without destroying the sort of the things that you shouldn't know as a character. So we're still working on that. It's probably going to be towards the end of next year that we finish that off. We've then got a high fantasy game, which is going to contain more of the sort of the classic high fantasy elements, such as roaming through dungeons and learning about having magic, having various different magical and non-magical races. A little bit of technology, but not too much. Kind of giant floating cities that have fallen to the ground and now are effectively dungeons because mountains have grown over them over the years since they fell. All of that kind of stuff is all going to feature within this game. We are still working on a lot of the details there. And then we've got a JRPG-inspired game that we're looking at, which is intended to capture the feel of games like Final Fantasy, and sort of bring you that within the Era D10 rule set. So the kinds of characters that you might experience, the kind of world and storylines that you might experience of saving the world from the great threats. Are all
I am
the
a
kinds
huge
of things
sucker
that
for
we're working on.
JRPGs, so I'm really excited about this one.
So am I. I've wanted to do
It's a
this
good
for a
idea.
long time, and it's taken a long time to get the right thoughts in line. It's so intimidating to sort of come to Final Fantasy and go, I really want to make something that feels like this, but how do I make a world with that detail and that feel that's so sort of such a specific
we need some
thing?
golden ostriches that we can ride.
Well, actually, we decided not to go with golden ostriches.
Oh,
But we will have mounts that you can ride, and we'll have cute little furry things running around, and we're doing everything we can.
Keys.
And then
There you go.
finally, the last two projects that I'm going to talk about
yes, yes,
Um,
yes,
today are Era Survival Colony,
yes.
which is based on the Era Survival RPG. And the idea of this is that you play as one of 4 characters who are trying to make sure that your little colony survives.
You're
So-
working together.
Yeah, you're working
And
as
you're
a
playing
co-op
against the deck.
group
Together.
playing against the deck in the attempt to survive everything that the world of Gaia, which is the one that Era Survival is based on, that's the world that it exists in. Everything that it's going to throw at you, from infected, from the swarm, which burn everything, and so on, and all of that stuff. And you've got to work together to survive, to recruit people, to salvage the equipment you need, to fight off the enemies, and to make sure that you keep enough food going for the entire colony, which is a really interesting challenge. That one's pretty much done. We've got a sample copy already. And finally, we've got Evil Overlord, which we put out for playtesting at MCM Comic Con, where you attempt to take over the world. It's a fast-paced trading game where you trade minions to other people because you have a set of minions that won't fight together. So you head on down to the minion market, and you trade your minions to the other evil masterminds who think they're going to take over the world in order to make the best army, and then you face off at the end. This is a super fast playing game. It takes about 5 minutes per hand. You can obviously play multiple hands, but it's designed for those times when not everyone's quite turned up to your role-playing game session yet, and you need to kind of kill some time, and maybe there are 3 more people to come. They arrive one by one, where you can just deal a new person in, and they've only got to wait 5 minutes.
Cool.
And that's
Those
all the
all
projects.
sound fantastic. Jeez. I mean, I assume you guys never sleep. That must be the case, because that's a whole lot of stuff to be working on. So, but looking into the future, just before we sign off here, because we're gonna have to sign off here in a little bit. Is there anything that any of you are really excited about in the future? Anything you can hint towards besides all these amazing things that are clearly coming out in the future?
Oh yes, we can.
John
Ah,
first.
if John's not going, I'm going. Right, I'm slowly adapting the stories in the core rulebooks for our an audio format to listen to the stories and get people immersed, and I'm narrating them too, so you'll be able to hear my lovely voice constantly, which may vary. We'll see.
But we're doing a little more than just that. So we're doing this audiobook that Leo just mentioned, which is intending to tell the stories of Era the Consortium for the people who are not wanting to sit down and read it all, or who prefer the audio format. And Leo is really, really good at this stuff. I know he can't say it, but I've listened to the stuff that he's produced, and it's awesome. And I wrote most of what he's reading. So, but we're doing a little more than that, because we're also looking at audio plays. we're looking at an audio play based around one of the really important characters who actually was the bad guy in that 14 billion people at risk incident that we were talking about earlier. And yeah, we're actually working on an audio play just at the moment, aren't we, Leo? To talk about his life and how he became what he is now.
That sounds really cool.
And I think John has something that he wants to talk about.
Yes, a comic I put together. It's set in the empowered universe, sort of, in that it, the different people in it have superpowers and they go out on patrols and stuff. But I wanted to create a hero who had both the best and most useless superpower ever. About 2 minutes into the future, but only when someone's about to die.
Ooh.
And because there's 1,000 possibilities that are happening at any given moment, her brain can't quite interpret all the different ranges of it. So it translates it in her head, and visually she gets like kind of an overlay. Long-limbed goblin creatures that are trying to kill everybody around her all the time. And sometimes the people are able to overcome them on their own. Sometimes the goblin thing just completely misses because, if you realize how close to dying you were every minute of every day, your brain would just pop.
Let's keep going before. Let's not end that topic.
So the comic's about her trying to come to terms with the fact that her ability is basically watching people almost die all the time. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to constantly know this stuff and be constantly driven to always act on it, when some of the time people were able to overcome death on their own. It was based on a comment that my dad likes to make is of life alive. So you...
It's true.
That's only slightly morbid.
Yeah, so you have to enjoy the time you have here, and you have to dedicate your life to making sure that you bring as much happiness to other people's lives as possible. And that's really what the comic was about, was a young woman trying to find her way through death into that space of, that this isn't something horrible and terrible that's always there. It's a reminder to enjoy and experience everything you can.
And this, amazing. I'm just going to leap in here. This is just one of several projects that John and I have planned. We're really planning to ramp up the SoV Comics part of Shades of Vengeance. We like comics. We've got some really good lines that we started off. Penumbra's one, The Bug War's another. We'd like to continue doing a lot of this stuff. And we're seeing a lot of support from our fans for doing this. So, we're absolutely... pushing forward with this stuff.
There is one more thing I'd like to mention. Can I? If you don't mind. The Battlecruiser Alamo stuff that we're talking about. Ed's going to be helping Richard and I run a Kickstarter for a graphic novel, which we're going to be bringing out in the new year. Ooh. So, and that's it's going to be based on one of the later books, which he's writing at the moment, actually, where they have first contact with an alien race on a Dyson sphere. I'm probably giving too many spoilers right away, but they're the same story told from the aliens' point of view. So it's something that we really wanted to do, and Ed's going to be helping us run the Kickstarter and produce the book and everything else. So we've not exactly nailed down how much involvement there is, but I think
I mean that actually brings me to the last thing I really want to talk about quickly, which is that if you are out there and watching this and you want to create a role-playing game, or you want to create a comic or an audio play or whatever it is that you're interested in, we work to help you. We've done it before with these guys. And, please come and visit us at imaginerpg.com. We are there. We'd like to help you bring your idea to be a reality. It's not going to mean it's no work. You're still going to have to work at it. You're still going to keep your idea. It'll be yours. But what Keith is talking about is an extension of exactly that same thing, We are just helping Richard to create this graphic novel and to get it out there and to run a Kickstarter for it and to get new people to learn about his universe.
Yeah.
That is a really admirable thing to do, and I think it's going to be I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to see what comes of it. So
I can't wait to get started.
it's super exciting. Well, do you guys have anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
I will give one small teaser, which is I am working on a game which probably involves miniatures. So if you're wondering where all the miniatures are from us, it's coming at some point in the future.
It's extremely exciting. Guess we'll have to wait and see. Right. Well, we are, in fact, so we're going to have to wrap it up, but I cannot thank you guys enough for coming out and talking with us today. This has been an absolute blast. I can't wait to spend all the money I don't have on all these cool things that I now absolutely need in my life. And thank you so much, you guys. So anything else anybody else wants to add before we say goodbye?
I just
Shall I be shameless?
I would just like to say thank you to everyone who's come here and watched us speak, and thank you very much to you for moderating us, keeping us vaguely on time, as much as is humanly possible, and yeah, for everything that you guys have done to make AetherCon happen.
Thank you very
So
much.
I heard something about shamelessness.
Yeah, Leo,
I
go
was
ahead.
I was going to be shameless on behalf of everyone else. Give us a Google. You can find us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're
On
we've
Kickstarter.
got a blog, and we're on Kickstarter, and we're also on Patreon. So if you want to get some exclusive goodies like extra campaign, things like that, you can check us out on there too. We've got a blog written by some of our writers that tells you about upcoming games and where we're going to be for upcoming conventions as well. Yeah, that was it. End shameless plug.
All right. Well, you heard it here, everybody. Check them out. Find out all the cool things that they're up to, and let's support what we can. All right. Thank you guys so much again.
Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure,
you.
and I hope you have a great night.